The most misunderstood mechanic in Songs of Syx is health. It's the difference between you having a solid, amazing city at 1,000 population to a death spiral as soon as you hit 2. And so today we're going to go in detail about what health is and how to actually combat it so that way you don't hit that death spiral yourself. This is a more advanced tutorial. If you are a new player, go check out my earlier tutorials. But besides that, let's get into it. At the very beginning of the game, when you only have 10 people in your population, assuming you don't have that title that gives you more than that, what you're going to see up here in this top left menu, all the really goodies up at the top right of here, health. Before we kind of get into the details of the menu, if you actually look at the icon up here, it's the one with the heart. It's got a number. The number is how many sick people you have in your city. Currently we have 0. We're just starting the game, right? The more people who get sick, the more you're going to need additional buildings and resources for them to keep them healthy and keep them going. Because as soon as they get sick, they're not actually going to be able to do anything, which is very frustrating. Especially if you're a new player, you're wondering where your workforce is going, why your production is slowing down, all that kind of stuff. Health is such an important thing, but it really doesn't matter for a while, especially in the beginning of the game. Like I said, currently we have 0 people sick, everybody's healthy, and if we actually look at the number for health, right here it's 43.68. That's a really high number. Anything less than 1 is when you start getting people who get sick. So we're not going to touch that for a really long time. If I hover over the health, you can see a more detailed tooltip that tells us how we're getting that calculation in the first place. I'll touch on this in more detail a little bit later because this is how we're going to fine-tune what we need to do to combat that. But first, I want to show you the difference between a city I've just been running and have been having a lot of frustrations with. This city has a lot more going on. It is a Kryptonian-only city. It's got 3.7 thousand population. So lots of plebeians comparatively, right? However, you can see over in that same health bar, I actually have 99 sick people, 99 infected people. If I click on the health, you can see that our health is actually at 0.84. Now let's get into exactly what that is and the problems that I have to face and combat. Let's go over the menu really quickly. At the top, of course, it has the infected people. The number below that is hospitals, so 0 out of 48. That's basically saying how many hospital spaces we actually have. And if I actually click on a hospital, you can see that I'm using all of the services. This one has 24 and 24 of them are being used. So all my hospitals are being used. These 99 infected people, essentially about 51 of them aren't actually able to get treatment, which means they could actually die. We talked a little bit below that. That number is health. This is our total number that's going to indicate how many people are infected or how many people aren't. And then we get down here into all the modifiers which make up that number health. Population, species, technology, physicians, food service, laboratories, all sorts of things, right? You can use this scroll bar to view this, or you can actually, again, hover over that health tooltip and it'll show you all those things in one go. It tends to be a little bit easier this way. And then it shows you how that number health is actually calculated. I want you to focus on the total number kind of at the bottom in the middle of that tooltip area where it says total and the formula. It says 1, that's the base value that we have, times 0.84. 0.84 is all of the values of those modifiers right below base value and above that total section there that are multiplied together. So 0.14, 1.73, 1.16, all the way down to the 2.19. Those are all multiplied together, and if you do it yourself, that'll get 0.8. There's a little bit of rounding in the game, but anyway. So that's how you get your total number of 0.84, which equates to our health. Let's head on back to the original screen so we can look at this a little bit. So here we are back at the original screen you're going to have in the game. If we go back over to health and we hover over health, you can see that a lot of those things that were highlighted before in the much bigger population aren't highlighted here. And that's because they basically just don't exist. There's no modifiers to add to them, so they're not actually being multiplied together. And so you can see the base value again, plus 1, that's going to be the same, times, and then a totally different number, 43.68. That number is equated by multiplying population and new arrivals, but not the total population number. It's like the modifier for your total population. So because we have 10 total population, that population modifier there is worth 45.45. Now let's not get into the weeds about how exactly this translates, but here's the most important thing you need to know about health. The more people you have in your city, the lower that value is going to be for population modifier, to the point where it actually starts having a huge negative effect on your total health. What does that actually mean? You can see to the right of that are the boundaries. That's the 100.000 for the upper boundary, and then it can go all the way down to a flat 0.00 as the lower boundary, which means that the bigger population that you have, the more and more debuff that population modifier is going to get, all the way to what you saw before, which now back at our bigger population here is 0.14. Essentially what that means is that at about 3.69 thousand population, our population modifier for health is times 0.14, which essentially means that all of the other values, you're only going to be able to get 14% of that. It's a huge debuff. It's a gigantic debuff. The biggest thing you should take away from this is that the more population, the harder that debuff, which means that you go below that base number that we all want, which is 1, meaning you start getting more and more people sick. You can see the snowball effect, right? This is honestly a brutal modifier. I'm giving you some technical stuff, but this is the most frustrating part about growing a city in the first place. And it's got a reason, so I don't want to hate on that, but I want to be just point blank with you. Higher populations, it's like a completely completely different game. On top of all the additional resources you're going to need to get and services you're going to need to provide for people, not to mention the empire and global structures that you're going to have to fight against, whether it's different empires or factions or raiders or whatever. All those things are just one part. Not to mention now you also have to combat a gigantic population modifier. Now I have been asking, I tried to look through the game codes, but I'm kind of stupid, so I could not find exactly where the formula was. But where I really start to notice this the most is right about 1,000 population. To give you an example, this is a different city. It's only about 1,200 population, right? If I go to health, the modifier is 0.7. You might be asking yourself, wait, Laundry, that's way less than what you had in the much bigger population. What gives? I'll get into that next, I promise. But if we hover over the population modifier, you can see that the modifier is 0.42. Essentially what that means to me is once you hit roughly 1,000 population, you really start to see the huge effects of the health modifier. And then everything above that just gets harder and harder and harder. Now I have not hit a point yet where I've actually reached a ×0 modifier, because that essentially would make it impossible for us to get anything above 0, which means our health would always be 0. Not to get into the weeds, but just the escalating nature of it is insane. It's just brutal. And so if you've been struggling trying to get past like 2,000 or 3,000 population, I bet a large part of that is because of the health modifier and the population modifier on that health. If this is below 1, you will get sickness. People will get sick, and unless you have amenities to actually help them out, like hospitals, then they could easily die, which means you're losing population, which means you have more corpses to deal with, which is another debuff, as you guys can see on that tab there. And it becomes this like cascading thing where, all right, now I have less people. That make people also less happy. Do I have enough happiness to combat that? Am I able to have a high enough birth rate to counteract that? Or am I just hemorrhaging my population and now I'm not even going to be able to produce the same thing? So I had all these orchards available for people to work in, but I don't even have the workers to sustain those orchards. Like, that's what we're talking about here. That's why health becomes such an important thing as you reach, I think, middle game. Middle game is 650 plus. That's like nobilities and plus in your population. And so this is a incredibly important mechanic that a lot of new players don't fully understand. So that's why I made the video in the first place. Let me know if this is actually helpful for you, by the way. I'd love to make these tutorials for people. Past ones seem to be pretty well loved. And again, all these things, these are things that I've learned myself. I have asked for tips. I tried to find a little bit more information. Here's what I always see though, is just make more physicians, make more physicians. But like, why does that matter? Why should you make more physicians? Well, let me show you. You can see here again at the tooltip, if you look at that, it's got the base value, population, food preference, corpses, wear-axe exposure, wells, lavatories, right? Those are all things that are modifiers. The things that are in red make it a smaller number, and again, worse health. Things that are in blue make it better, and then better health, right? What I want you to focus on here is actually the bounds of each of those modifiers. So food preference, for example, my current value in this playthrough is 1.2, and that essentially means that I'm getting like a 20% boost, or at least I'm adding that 1.2 modifier, so it's increasing, right? Well, that's the max I can possibly get from this modifier, because the minimum is 1.0, which essentially means I'm not getting any boost at all, and then the max is 1.2, which means that that's the max I can possibly get. So by providing the food preferences of the species that I have, I'm getting the max amount for that specific modifier, that specific buff. But that does like nothing to counteract the huge loss in population, right? So food preference is helpful, but it's not that impactful, at least health-wise. Whereas things like wells, if I look at that, my current modifier is 1.22. Well, the boundaries is 1.0 to 1.50. Hope I'm doing this correctly visually. I guess 1.0 to 1.50, which means that I have 0.50 to actually like make up, and that if I reach the max of it for wells, I'm getting a bigger impact than if I got the max of the food preferences. Are you with me so far? Our goal would be to have amenities, have decrees, and whatever, make choices and build an industry that will create the biggest impact on this health modifier to counteract population and a couple of other things there in red. The food preferences does a little bit, but it's not really comparable to like a well or lavatories, right? Each of those has a 0.5 additional modifier buff that we can give to it if we max it out. And if we don't have any of them, we don't get any modifier, right? It's just ×1. In this playthrough, you can see there kind of down in the bottom, and I'll even hover it over here, population, species, technology, physicians. Our buff is ×1, which is no buff at all. Anything ×1 is it just itself. I know it's very math heavy. And so we're not getting any buff at all. And the reason that is, if you know it, I actually don't have a single physician on this entire map. I've got lavatories. You can see lavatories right here, but I don't have any physicians at all, which means I'm not getting any boosts from physician. Let's go to the other playthrough. In this playthrough with the 3,000 people, again, my health is actually better, and I'll tell you why. Look at physicians. I have a 2.19 bonus, and if I hover over the tooltip, you'll see that physicians, that's kind of at the bottom of that top section there, physicians, 2.19 is my current buff. Well, look at the boundaries, 1.0 and then 4. If you're thinking in comparison, physicians are basically 6 times as valuable as a laboratory or a well, and they're 15 times more valuable than like food preference. In this one, you can also see food servings. I've increased food servings. That's another thing. Later, we'll get into every single thing that you can do to adjust his health, but you can see the boundaries for that's 1 to 2, right? So that's pretty impactful. But again, physicians has a huge modifier potential. And so all you got to do is be able to max out the physician fulfillment and value for your specific city, and you'll have a gigantic modifier to add and potentially get you over the health value of 1. And that's really what our goal is, right? That's why people say physicians matter so much. It's not just a meme, it's a thing that actually works based off of the map. You get more impact from the same level of fulfillment. But now you're probably wondering, what exactly does fulfillment mean? Okay, let's get into that next. Any of your cities are going to have some amenities, right? Everybody knows about the wells, everybody knows about hearths, and what these do is not only just have services, they provide a specific kind of fulfillment for your species. Let's go to our Crotonians. We can do it on anyone, but if we go to this menu where we're learning more about our city, there's lots of things I can do to improve this, but if I go to services, this has all the potential services and then the bars for fulfillment. This is the number that matters to us. So if I go to the hearth, for example, if I hover over hearth, I currently have a 44% fulfillment value. Well, what does that actually equate to? Well, how do I get that number? And if you haven't looked at it before, it's access times proximity times quality times upgrades. That's what gets us to 44%. So that means I can get another 64% of fulfillment by getting better proximity and by fully upgrading all of my hearths. It's the same thing with all of your other amenities. So with the speaker, you have access, proximity, quality, upgrades. I haven't upgraded any speakers, haven't upgraded any hearth. I have upgraded some of my wells though. So access, I have 99% here, proximity 89%, quality 100%, and upgrades 55%. This is an upgraded well right here, upgraded 1 of 2. And so this is providing more fulfillment because of that upgrade. I'll stick on wells for a second because this kind of helps us understand a little bit about what's going on. So keep 60% in your mind. If I go back to the health and I go to the species here, I can look at wells. Currently I have a buff to my health of 1.3. And if I hover over the tooltip for health, you can see that there. Wells 1.3. The boundaries for wells are 1.0 to 1.5, just like for laboratories, right? Well, how do I get 1.3? Think about the range. What's the range? Well, between 1 and 1.5, you have a difference of 0.5. I'll do the math for you. And again, our fulfillment level for wells was 60%. And so if we multiply 0.5 times 0.6, giving us 60% of the difference there, we get 0.3. So that's how you're calculating your boosts. So in order for us to get the full 1.5, that 0.5 range to get all of it, we have to get 100% fulfillment from our wells. That means we need to upgrade all of our wells. That means that the proximity has to be 100% and access is 100% and all those things for the well. And that can be a lot of work for sure. And it's the same thing with laboratories. If I go to the laboratories on our services and I see that currently I have a 36% fulfillment. I'm not going to make you sit through the math here. 0.5 times 0.36 is 0.18. So that's what we're getting, the base modifier of like 1 plus the percentage that you have. I hope that's making sense to you. That's how we get those numbers for each individual service, which means, and this is why it's important, if you have physicians, let's go to access for physicians, or services for physicians, excuse me, go right here. Even though it's a smaller bar here, that's just general fulfillment. We have 40% of fulfillment from our physicians, and the total range for that modifier is 3. So 3 times 0.4, 1.2. There is always a little bit of rounding. Maybe it's a relic from a previous day where I had less fulfillment from the physicians anyway, but you can see it's very close. It's lined up in there. This is also from testing. So if there's like a different formula that doesn't make sense to me, that doesn't mean that's not what's actually happening in the game, but like that seems pretty consistent to me. So so that's actually why physicians are the best thing to upgrade, and that's simply because the range that they provide for your health boosts, your health buffs, is so much bigger than everything else. And even if you don't upgrade any of your physicians, just having them is huge. You can increase things like access and proximity by having more physicians, and of course this is going to adjust by your city size, right? If you have a huge city like this one, it's not the biggest, but it's pretty big, right? That's what she said. It still provides such a big boost comparatively in health stats. Like even at 40%, I have more fulfillment with my wells, and I'm getting so much more actual health benefits from the physician, which if you think about it, like from a story standpoint, of course that makes sense. Other things that have huge range are technology, the species buffs that you have, titles can be relatively impactful, specific events, religion can be helpful. There's all sorts of modifiers and they're all there. But our main goal is to combat the huge decay that we're getting from our health based off of the huge population rate. And so this is why you stall out. You don't have enough to overcome that, and that's probably because you just didn't know what actually did overcome that. So here's what it is. This is also just helpful information to have for other tooltips. There's a lot of other tooltips that have the ranges of things, and it's not very clearly stated that that's what it is. It takes a little bit for you to actually discover that and make that connection. It took me a little bit anyway, but I was staring at the screen trying to figure out, like, why am I having such difficulty? And then it dawned on me that honestly the biggest problem is that people underestimate how much population actually affects your health. Like in real life that makes sense, but like it's a game. You never know fully what these systems are going to change or do to the interactions that you have in the game, right? And so that's why it's pretty difficult to fully understand what's working and what's not working. But physicians, that's why they say they're so important. One thing I'm noticing here is that a lot of my physicians, of course, are being outserviced. Like I have very few services left on my physician. You can see that with your service access, right? If it's only 40%, I have 92% access and 84% proximity. With everything else, of course, you can also click on that building and it'll show you the entire distance that it'll travel. But I got a dead spot right here and a huge dead spot right here where I have a whole bunch of actual industry. I have a stone mine, I've got a couple of masonries, I got a bunch of houses. So all these people, none of them have access to a physician. And so I can increase this modifier for my physicians just by including that. Now the downside to this huge thing is that you probably did not realize the additional freaking resources you were going to need to actually get to upgrade these things. Like let's take a well for example. I upgraded this once. I'll take one that I didn't upgrade. This has no what a well requires to upgrade is stone, clay, and cut stone. Stone and clay, you can basically find those on almost every single map tile that you start with, but cut stone is a secondary process. You either have to make that yourself with masonries, which requires tech for you to get and a whole other balancing act of your logistics chains, or you actually have to buy them, which means you're going to have the money to purchase them in the first place. But not only just purchase them once, you're also going to need to have them available for your janitors because things degrade and janitors have to have the supplies to actually keep things working. Like even the shrine has a degrade percentage. So if you upgraded a shrine, for example, with furniture, like you'd still have to have furniture available to upgrade that or keep it maintained, excuse me. And the same thing with your other productions. You can see that we do need a lot of stone and furniture and all that kind of stuff to make sure these other things are maintained. So you can see the dilemma you're going to have here, right? The upgrades themselves provide a whole bunch. Basically, you literally cannot go above, I think it's 50%. Yeah, you won't be able to go above, it looks like 50% without like any upgrades at all. I haven't upgraded my hearts at all, and the only thing I'm missing is like proximity to a couple of them, which means you're only going to get half of the total range, which case in point, that half might not be a lot for a couple things like wells, but it sure is a lot for your physicians. You're missing out on huge modifiers if you cannot actually do that, which I am now. I don't have any of my physicians upgraded. If I did, I'd be able to overcome the health benefits, and I probably wouldn't have 97 people who are sick and about 49 or so people that I can't treat. I will say this, I've been trying to find where I'd be able to get more health boosts from technology. I really don't see it. My assumption is that there's going to be things later on we'll be able to assist with this, but right now they're maybe not in the game. I might be wrong about that. The only thing I can see is in physics, which is where you get like a medicine research, and that actually gives you the effect of plus 0.03 as an additional health benefit, right? Whereas if you actually go over health, you can see down below there, if you look at technology, the range is 0 to 6. So it's like a huge range, but like I don't know how you'd fulfill that in version 71. Anyway, so what does this mean for you progressing in the game? How do you combat all of these things that you need to get done, knowing that there is such a huge penalty for having excess population? What do you actually do? Well, for starters, you should do the things you have available to you right now. Having wells in the first place gives you a buff, right? It's not a huge buff, but it's something. Food servings, if you go to your access and provide as many food servings as you can, that'll give you a buff as well. Be able to provide the food preference, which you want to do anyway because it makes them happier. That will also provide them a buff, right? You can actually see that in the tooltip for food preference and food days. Definitely in food preference at the effects down at the bottom there. And so anything you have immediately available, you should already be trying to accumulate and do. The hard part about this game is the balancing, right? What are you willing to invest in that will actually help you? And then what things can't you invest in because it's just simply going to make it too difficult for you to sustain? Like, are you able to actually upgrade your wells if you need cut stone and clay? Like, are you going to be able to either support manufacturing that, or are you going to be able to support it with trade? Because if you can't, then that's not your answer, right? You got to find some other way to do that. Well, the laboratory only costs furniture to make, right? And so maybe you make a small laboratory, you make a few of those, and it just takes a couple of workforce and then a bunch of those services get fulfilled and people become healthier. Because you have to manufacture furniture anyway, maybe that's a thing that you can do. Maybe that's easier for you to get. Maybe you have some additional tech points and you're feeling like, hey, I actually do need to get physicians. Well, what does it actually cost? Well, it costs a total of 50 knowledge because you actually have to purchase healthcare to get the hospitals, which again, don't help with health, they help with recovery, in order for you to actually get medicine, which unlocks the physician building. So you actually have to have 50 knowledge points. That either means that you have to wait for you to hit a Prontix, which is 400 plebeians, not too difficult, but then you're spending a bunch of your knowledge points on that, or you have to unlock something like the library and then actually staff it to get those knowledge points. Regardless of how you get that, for a physician, you just need the tech to unlock it, and then you can go from there. It doesn't take a whole lot of extra things to make the physician. The building itself only costs wood and furniture. So it's actually not an expensive building to build unless you're having issues with furniture. A lot of buildings need furniture. If you haven't thought about it now, you need to be making furniture or importing it a bunch. But if that's the easiest thing for you to do that, right? I'll tell you what, if you're able to get physicians, I would do that a lot sooner than you think you have to. Because there's really nothing more debilitating than just having enough workers to fulfill all your production chains, but losing people to illness and then not being able to actually fulfill those production chains. So now I'm not able to produce the amount of food. Now I'm not able to produce the amount of cut stone that I needed. Or maybe I'm not even able to staff my laboratories or my libraries anymore, and now I'm losing innovation and tech points, and then I actually lose the ability to maintain those buildings, and then it's just this big spiral. You start small, what things do you have now, and then you continue to build out. Now you can see currently up to 3.75k. I haven't really done anything, I've just been watching, and the population modifier dipped down to 0.1. It will continue to dip down. It gets harder and harder and harder the more people that you have. And so if this is not a consideration whenever you're building your bigger city, that's a huge flaw. And honestly, that's the difference between like a brand new player like I was 5 seconds ago to a much better player figuring out how the game actually works. Now before you leave, there are a couple of extra things that you can do that I don't want to leave you hanging on that actually don't cost anything. So again, if you hover over the health bar, you can actually see the health that you had, which tells you like the total percentage, of course, which is 83. This is just a reflection of this number down here. Also, there's some known diseases. It'll tell you a little bit about those. Spread, incubation days, all that kind of jazz. I think it's kind of interesting. You don't have to think about it too much. Pretty cool. But something you can do to help out, let's say you get a bunch of people infected. One of the things you can do is if you actually go up to the law tab and you hover over this menu here, which tells you all the laws and decrees that you can make, over to the right next to captives is this button. It's called curfew. What this does is prevent criminals and prevent diseases from spreading. So what I can do is I can click this, a curfew is in effect, and now there's less people here to spread that disease in the first place. It's not a perfect solution. It's a band-aid solution for sure, but stopping the spread of the disease can be just as valuable. I don't see this reflected at all in the health number, so I do want to say that. I noticed that this just deactivates randomly. I'm not exactly sure what triggers it, but that'll help stop some of the spread of your disease. I don't find it super impactful. Sometimes it is, but I really just don't find it that impactful. Another thing to think about is religion. You should start off whatever religion you think is going to be the best for your playthrough pretty early on. I chose Craterism here specifically because it produces a lot of additional buffs for like farms and pastures and stuff. But if you actually look at Arminianism, it has a 10% increase in health. The way for you actually to get this buff is to have that religion and then also have the temples. So in order for us to get this boost at all, we actually have to research the technology in order to get that health boost. And so it's a much later game boost. And at that point, every kind of small increment really does matter. And so that's why I kind of saved for this. You're not going to be able to use it, but something to keep in mind, right? Arminianism is helpful for that. None of the other religions are. Arminianism is also good for submission and lifespan. So you can see it kind of lends itself to longer life playthroughs and things those lines. Whereas Craterism actually has a buff to natural births, which kind of helps you offset stuff, right? If you have enough people coming in, enough births being done, then the deaths kind of offset and you're still able to provide for yourself. It's a lot trickier. It's also very stressful to play that way. Long story short, health is the most important thing for you to master in order for you to actually kick it up another notch. I've found that out pretty violently here. I've lost an insane amount of people to health issues simply because I did not fully understand the mechanics of what health actually was. I made this video to help people who were in the exact same situation I was 5 seconds ago, but I am in no way an expert, and so if you know more about this than I do, feel free to comment exactly what you do to help out your health benefits. But if I were to summarize, I would do it like this. The basic necessities that you can make without additional hardship, you should do pretty soon. Wells, lavatories, food servings, and food preference are all things you're gonna have to do anyway. The next big step is going to be your physicians. I do think you should do physicians before you upgrade anything, because that's honestly going to be the biggest crux of your entire operation. They don't cost a whole lot extra for you to produce. Basically, things you're already making help you make them anyway. The only thing is that they cost knowledge points for you to get. That's the trade-off. And then from there, I would start upgrading stuff. I would upgrade your physicians as soon as possible. I haven't upgraded any of these physicians. Let's go and look at one. The upgrade cost for this at the beginning is cut stone and furniture. I have enough of that. Let's go ahead and upgrade this one if I can. Not letting me. Awesome. Oh, it requires medicine. Another lesson. In order for you to continue to upgrade, you're going to need this medicine. Another 50 knowledge points. So to upgrade it once, that's what you need. The second upgrade is going to cost another 100 knowledge points. So you'll probably be able to upgrade other things first. And honestly, that makes sense. The impact of other things is less, and so they're easier to get. But all right, I'm a little bummed. I thought I'd be able to upgrade them a little faster than that. Anyway, upgrading lavatories also is going to require tech. And actually, before I move on, it is going to require tech for all these upgrades. If you want to upgrade your lavatories, you need to do that here at Posh Relief. If you want to upgrade your wells, you need to do that here at Architecture down here in the Fancy Well. And so, like, tech is pretty important for these things, I will say, which is why the next video is going to be all about creating more and more tech for you to have those upgrades in the first place. But let me know what you guys think about health. Is this way too brutal for you to have? Is this number just like not a good modifier for you? Or does it totally make sense? Like 3.75 thousand population is like a pretty big city. It's nothing small. It's not a settlement anymore. It is a city. But for those of you who are able to consistently get over like 10, 15,000 population, what exactly are you able to do to keep that health in check? Because the modifier just seems so brutal. I find it really difficult to do that sustainably. Or do you just eat it? Let me know in the comments. I really appreciate everyone being here. If you got something from this video, let me know. Subscribe and like so that way I know that people are actually getting something from this. I love playing this game. This game is truly amazing. I'm frustrated, but that's because I love it. I want more people to play it. That's why I'm making these videos. And it seems like there's a really great community for Songs of Syx too, and I'd like to be part of that. I'd like to foster that here. So if that's something you want to be a part of, feel free to subscribe and hang out, watch a couple of videos, and leave your thoughts below on how you handle health modifiers and get past that 2,000, 5,000 population. All right, guys, I appreciate you being here. My name's Laundry, and I'll catch you later.